Hello everyone. So I had an email asking me what's going on with this ball bouncing assignment, and I figured instead of having to type all this out, it would be easier to showcase this. So this is After Effects. If you don't see a window that looks like this, you can go to the window. Actually, let me just start a new composition first. There we go. New composition. I'm just going to name it Ball Bounce, just for the sake of that. This is what it's doing. It's a ball bounce. I believe it starts itself head off with like HDV 1080. I'm just setting this down to NTSC DV 72480 just for the sake of file size here. Right now it currently has a frame rate of 30 frames a second, basically. You know, anyone that plays video games has heard 30 frames a second, 60 frames a second. In movies, it's generally 24 frames a second. The start time code is currently 0000. That's 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds, and 0 frames. And the current duration happens to be 10 seconds long with a background color of white. That's just what I currently have as these settings. I'm not going to worry about advanced or 3D rendered. I'm just going to click OK. So this is what we have here. In the left-hand side, I have my files. The files that are currently in my project. This is what my project currently looks like. It's a white background. Over on this right-hand side, I have my my effects, my libraries, other stuff like that. And at the bottom is my timeline. This timeline is basically the key thing in After Effects, because what we're doing with animation is we're tracking changes over time. If you don't see this window, I just go up to the Windows workspace. It's labeled default. Okay, so there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this rectangle tool, and I'm going to first make myself an ellipse. So in theory, if I just hold Shift and click, and if I hold Shift and I hold Command, it should, in theory, grow generally out from the center. So now I have a green ball, and it's just called Shape Layer 1. If I right-click that, go to Rename, I can name this Ball, because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be my bouncing ball. I can have my arrow key. I can move it around. Sorry, my arrow key. My arrow tool right here, my selection tool, hand tool, zoom tool, shape tool, pen tool, text tool, the typical usual stuff. Selection tool allows you to select things and move it around. But you'll also notice that when I have this ball selected, in my timeline, I have these arrows, so I have contents, and there's the ellipse, and there's the ellipse path, and there's the stroke, and the fill, and all these different things, the actual contents that make up the ball. We're not going to deal with any of that right now. But we also have this transform. These are the 5 basic things that you can do with an object. You can move its position, either left or right or up and down. And of course, we do have an option for 3-dimensional objects, which will then add a z-axis to this, but we're not going to deal with that now. We have scale. We can scale it uniformly, or if I unclick this link, I can scale it one way and the other way. I'm going to re-click that. We have opacity, which will allow us to, change how transparent it is. And we have rotation. Now, if you notice with rotation, it's not really rotating off of the center. That's because of the 5th guy here, the anchor point. The anchor point is by default in the exact center of the screen. And when I drew my circle, I did not draw my circle in the exact center of the screen. So if I were to move this down here, now that little crosshair is at the edge, so now if I rotate it, I'm rotating it around that little crosshair. But if I move my anchor point generally where I think the center is, and I could get way more specific and take way more time trying to figure that out. Now when I rotate it, it's generally in the center. It might be a little off, doot 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 doot. Doot doot. Doot 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 doot. Let's try it there. It looks like it's kind of scaling normally now, and it's close enough. It's close enough for government work. So, what we're going to do here is this timeline is going to track our changes. And the first thing I would need to do then is I would need to just hit this little keyframe button, this little stopwatch next to position. And you'll see that there's a little diamond right there on the timeline. I just moved the tape head out of the way to showcase. That diamond means that at that spot, in this spot in the timeline, I recorded this position, which means it's always going to be in this position at the timeline. If I move it all the way over to like 6 seconds and move it over here, you'll now see that there is an arrow, or sorry, that there's a line going across there. I now have 2 keyframes. And if I hit the play button, which is space, over the span of my 6 seconds, there we go. That was my animation. So let me just delete these 2 keyframes here. And I will start back at the top. And let's make this ball actually bounce. So I'm going to have this ball bounce maybe 1, 2, 3 times and then just roll across the screen. How about that? That sounds like a generally decent attribute of this concept. So I'm just going to start my position, keyframe, click the stopwatch, boom. And I'm going to say it's going to take, I don't know, 1 second for this ball to reach this spot right here. And then I'll take another second, generally speaking, and I can tell I'm exactly on that second because I have the 0, 2, 0, 0, so I'm at 2 seconds, 0 frames. Whereas right there, I'm once again at, well, now I'm at 1 second, 0, 2 frames, but I can always just go this little arrow key to the previous keyframe, previous keyframe, previous keyframe, that sort of thing. I know I'm at exactly 1 second. I can do the same thing here. I can know I'm exactly at 2 seconds, and I can do the ball right there. And I can move it down to exactly 3 seconds, and say the ball does that. And then at 4 seconds, the ball goes there. And 5 seconds, the ball will go there. And you know what? Let's give it one little tiny bump just for fun. Boop. And boop. And then at 10 seconds, it'll just roll across the screen this way. It'll just leave the stage. There we go. So, now if I hit play here, which is once again the space bar, this is my animation of my bouncing ball. And it takes 10 seconds to accomplish it, and boom, there it goes. And there it goes, it starts back over because it's set to automatically replay. That's well and good. That is a ball bouncing. But if we look at it as we play, it's not really looking like it's bouncing. This ball is made up of some sort of completely bizarre, gravity-defying thing, where it takes just as much time to go up, and it takes just as much time to go down. There's kind of really no momentum here. So you'll notice, when I click on one of these keyframes, there's these 2 little things here. Those are the handles, the Bezier handles. We can also see the graph through the graph editor, but I try, and you'll see that we have ourselves a complete linear motion going boom, 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 boom. So we're going to have to do some things. So first off, at this point where there's our point right there, I could do a easy in, ease out, which, you know, boom, there we go. Makes it so that there's more notes dot, 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 dot at the center, which means now it'll slow down the motion as it gets closer to that point, which, you see how it kind of slowed down there, a little dip? I can do that. Now, obviously, I just did a dip at the bottom of a drop, where in theory it has the most momentum. So I'm going to undo that with Command Z, and I'm going to make sure that I'm on the actual ones that are at the top. I'm going to do the ones that are actually at the top for the easy in. Boop. There we go. Ease in that one. I'll just go over boop, ease in that one. I can do a boop, ease in that one as well. And just for the sake of argument at the very start, because it hasn't gotten full terminal velocity yet, ease in that one. So now if I look at this, boing, boing, it kind of has a little pause at the top. So it's not going at a complete uniform rate. I can unclick the graph editor, and I'm back at my normal editor, and you'll notice that some of my key changes have changed from having a diamond to a little hourglass. The other thing that I can do is I can just grab these little handles. You might not be able to see them too well, but they're these little tiny dots that are near the keyframes, and I can just stretch these guys out like this to change the general motion of the angle of how it goes. So if I want it to go this way, there we go, it can. Now that was kind of a silly bounce, but I could do that. So now that I have this bouncing and it's pausing at the top because gravity, you're going to come to a standstill as you go higher and higher. Gravity's pushing you down and the force is pushing you up. You're going to get less and less height each second overall. So I'm going to do a little squash and stretch because the ball is now kind of looking like it's being affected by gravity, but at the same time it doesn't really look like it's bouncing. It still looks like it's just going up and down and it's maintaining its solid shape the entire time. This ball is bouncing, right? So it should be made of rubber or something like that. So I'm going to go to scale, and I'm going to unhook the scale here so that I can now have X and Y as it is. Because I'm thinking by the time we've hit, I don't know, say like this part right here, this Y, we're going down. So we should, in theory, I don't know, like 125. We're going down, okay? Boom. Because now, as it picks up speed, it's going to straighten itself out. We got a little motion blur effect. No, I'm not hitting the actual motion blur option here, but we've got ourselves the effect of that. The actual elasticity of this ball is stretching as it falls. And when it hits the ground, well, okay, well, it's not going to be that. So when something hits the ground, it compresses. So let's go to 75. Why not? So now it gets flatter. Boing. But at the same time, it's not just simply getting flatter. We're going to get wider. Okay? And let me just move back to my previous keyframe. Because I still want that to be 100. Yep, okay, so we got... boing. Okay, cool. So that's about where I wanted to be. And where did I have that? I had that at about 25 frames out. Okay, cool. So I'll just do that again then. I'll do 5 frames out. And I'll stretch this guy back to 100. And I'll stretch this guy back to 100. And then by the time we get to about here, I'm going to say we're once again back to that 125 effect because it's going up. And then as we get to this part right here, we're back to 100. And there, I think I've generally got myself a nice little bounce. Let's take a look at it. Let me hit play. Boing. Okay, maybe I need to have a little bit of a wobble effect, so maybe I stretch this out to maybe 110. Whoop, 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 whoop. I noticed I was not on the keyframe. So always be sure to go to your previous keyframe position, use little arrows to jump back and forth to it. Let me switch this to about, I don't know, 110. There we go. How does that look now? Boing. Okay, cool. I generally like this idea. So, if I were to do this, so let's say boop, 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 boop. I'm just selecting these keyframes. I can also just click and drag those keyframes like that by selecting them all. Copy, and let me just move over to about here, paste. And I can just scoot these guys over some. And then I think I can do the same thing over here, scoot these guys over some. And let's see how this looks. Boing. Okay, and that's now it looks like it's kind of bouncing. Now, obviously, it's not going to take 1 second for every single one of these bounces. Probably be a little bit faster paced, obviously. But I've got myself something that's looking a little bit more realistic here. And let's see here. So right about there, and this keyframe, and let's just jump over this to this guy. At this point in time, you're going to be 100, 100. You're a normal ball now. So now I've got myself a little squash and stretch effect, where now the ball looks like it has a little bit of elasticity to it, and it's bouncing. And that's generally how you can make a bouncing ball. Now I'm going to go one step further here, and I'm going to make the ball look like it's rolling as well. Because right now we have ourselves a complete solid background, solid color. Even if I had a ball, because at this last part where it rolls, you know, even if I were to circle this, it's a completely flat green color that I have right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make another little ellipse. And something like that. And I'm going to change it with a white background. There we go. Boom, a white fill. And I'm going to name this guy, rename. I'm going to name this guy light reflection. Because that's what this generally is. It's a light reflection. It's a reflection of the light on the ball. And I'm going to move this, generally saying right about there. And we haven't gone over parents yet, but I'm going to select a parent object. And I'm going to make the ball its parent object. So now when this ball bounces, you'll see that the ball itself, the little light, follows the ball with it. It will do any movement that the ball itself does. I'm going to change one thing. I'm going to change its... Well, first and foremost, let me change this guy's anchor point a bit. Put it somewhere like that, because position-wise, that's generally the center. Okay, cool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the rotation. So at this point right here, this is where it starts rolling, right? So I'm going to go rotation. And then at the end of this thing right here, I don't know, I could do percentages, which is, you know, slight percentage, or I can do full rotation. So let's just go and say you're going to have -5 rotations. Let's see how that looks. So and that's from there to there, we're going to have -5 rotations. So boing, 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 boing. And there it is rotating. Now that was obviously way too many rotations. Let's go with -3. And then -2. Let's go with -2. And realistically, if I were to make this like super realistic, this ball is rolling a little bit no matter what as it bounces along here. But that's just generally how you can make a simple animation in about probably 30 minutes I've been talking. And realistically, like one of the homework was just make the ball. Another one of the homework was adding squash and stretch to it. So this is essentially 2 homework assignments, generally speaking, all in one, plus a little bit of stuff that we'd learn later on for parenting and linking. So there's that. So yeah, now how would you wind up doing this? So we've got ourselves our composition. We can always go to the, I click this guy. If I go to, where's the add to render queue? One moment, go to help, render. Export, add to render queue. So it's under file. File, export, add to render queue. And there's the render queue. It pops up here. So I can hit my settings. Right now it's best settings, lossless, output 2, not yet specified. I would like to outload this to, yeah, I'll outload this to my, actually no, I'm going to outload this to my, just for the sake of argument here, I'm going to outload this to my iCloud desktop. No, let me just go to my downloads. One moment. Desktop. I'm just going to put it directly on my desktop just so I can show you so I can just easily find it and showcase it. So hit save and render, and it's going to render out my animation. Here's what I've done. There we go. Heard a little da-ding. That's what that is. By the way, this was me trying to figure out where the heck they moved the Bézier's tool to. So, but here's my ball bouncing. Boop, boop, boop. Ball bounce on MOV. File isn't, oh, because I'm currently in I'm currently in my QuickTime player recording this while I have that. But there's where my finished movie would be. Can I open with VLC while I do this? So yes, here we go. Remind me later. And here's my ball bouncing animation that I made. So yeah, you can prove that, there we go, it winds up working. I would need both the finished file and I will need the After Effects file, the file you actually made everything in, when you're submitting the assignment. But that's generally how we would wind up making a bouncing ball animation of some sort of description in this program. It's all literally just going into these objects, selecting what you want to transform, going to where you want to transform it to, and do the changes. That's really all it is. It's all about these keyframes down here. That's it. So, and that's the basic concept of animation in general. You have a start point, you have an end point, and the computer is going to transition between those 2 points. That's all it is. Thank you very much. I hope this was insightful for you all. And yeah, if anyone needs any other help, please don't be afraid to ask, and I will, I will see what I can do. Thank you very much. You guys have a great day. Bye.